Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show, Crosstalk. Well, if it's Saturday, it can only mean one thing. The fate of the world will be decided during
You're trembling out there, George.
Yes, so the nervous waiting has come to an end. It means thumbs ups and thumbs downs for the week. I'll go first. Good, you've got a big list there, Peter. Good. My thumbs down is the FBI. Now, we know that the Comey gang is gone. James Comey, McCabe, Strzok, Page, Priestap, all those guys who were so ghastly during the Trump years, they're all out. But nothing much has changed at the FBI.
The culture.
So during this week, we had the FBI raiding the offices and home of Rudy Giuliani.
Number one.
But I think there's more to be said about Giuliani, later on as well. So former prosecutor in New York, legendary prosecutor in New York, former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. As you mentioned, Peter, he was the guy that Law and Order was based on. He was the tough guy who cracked down on Wall Street and the mafia and so on. So, he represented the president. The guy went after him. But there's other, things that the FBI has been doing. The other day, they raided a couple in Alaska who own a small spa, just small business owners. They raided them because they were under the impression that they had stolen Nancy Pelosi's laptop. Nancy Pelosi's laptop is one of these interesting items that kind of appears and then disappears, and then we forget all about it. There was a lot written about it early January. Then the story just vanished. Never heard any more about it. Suddenly, it's reappeared. This laptop. They said no. They kept demanding that this couple was had the laptop. They stormed into their home, guns aloft, obviously terrifying. Put them in handcuffs. And kept, interrogating them ruthlessly. And then after 3 hours, they finally disclosed the photograph that they were basing their raid on. And of course, as it turned out, there wasn't even a remote physical similarity between the woman whose home they raided and the woman in the photograph. Whoops, mistake. They broke the door and they promised that they'll pay to repair it. So that's that. I mean, the idea that you can just storm into people's homes on the basis of a blurry photograph, nothing else, just a blurry photograph. I mean, because she was wearing a coat similar to the woman in the photograph, mind-boggling. Well, and in the meantime, just one more item on the FBI. In the meantime, the Pfizer court earlier this week published a report saying that the FBI had been conducting massive abuses of its powers. They've been conducting warrantless searches of people's data, even after they'd promised that they're not going to do this. But the Pfizer court concluded that the FBI has now pledged, this is probably for about the 10th time, that they pretty pinky promise never to do this again. And therefore the Pfizer court said, okay, we're satisfied, no Fourth Amendment violations here. And so it goes on. Peter.
The FISA court should be dissolved.
Absolutely.
Okay, it's acquitted itself so badly. It's a joke. It's a perfunctory joke now. On the second story, and the couple in Alaska, I don't know. I mean, maybe just knock on the door.
Yes.
Say hello. We're the FBI. Can we come in and chat with you?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, they weren't. There was no suspicion that they had explosives or firearms.
Right.
Well, what are they going to do? Use it, the laptop, if it were there, as a human shield, or I mean?
Yes, exactly. There's just small business owners, who attended this rally. I mean, according to the couple, they didn't even enter the Capitol building. So, you storm into someone's home, absolutely terrify them. on the basis of a blurry photograph? That's all you got? It's just extraordinary.
And in going to the Giuliani story, I mean, they didn't want the Hunter Biden hard drives. Right. I mean, this is, you know, and investigating Rudy Giuliani for violating the FARA Act, when I'm sure Hunter Biden signed up as a foreign agent for Ukraine, George. And
I'm sure he did.
Sure he did, you know.
I'm sure it's all
and for Kazakhstan, for China, okay. I mean, this is just on its face ridiculous here. And on top of it, I think we've pointed out, I think that there've been 7 prosecutions and 1 conviction of this act, okay? When half of Washington, D.C., if not more, are acting as foreign agents. I mean, this is just...
And incidentally, when it's a conviction, all that happens is you have to actually register under FARA and you pay a fine. That's it. It's a technical crime. I mean, that's all it is. I mean, the whole idea that this is some serious business is ludicrous. That is, well, and at least is
and on top of it, it is highly unusual, very irregular to do this to an attorney. I mean, irrespective if Donald Trump is his client. I mean, attorneys in general. I mean, courts are just very, very wary. The long history of that, because basically they are a member of the court, as it were, and it's usually done in a gentlemanly way. Hey, Rudy, can you come down tomorrow morning, maybe in the afternoon? We'd like to have a chat. Right. And I'm sure he would say, of course, that used to be my office. I'll come down there. We'll have lunch, Right. It could have easily been that way.
Right. That's right.
But no, they're sending out a message. They're sending out a message to all Trump surrogates that we're watching. We have you in our scope.
Right. Right.
So,
when you go into an attorney, you seize all his electronic devices. Can you imagine what's on those devices? Notes of his meetings with his clients.
I promise we won't read those, George. We promise.
We absolutely promise. We will not read them. As soon as we see, it's a client memo, we're definitely not going to take a look.
Okay. You and I were brought up on that TV series, the FBI. And from what I understand, J. Edgar Hoover actually read all of the scripts before they went to production. I've heard this, okay? Yes. And you have this kind of pristine, totally professional, humorless, facts, only the facts, ma'am. I mean,
this is Symbolist Jr., yeah.
That's right. And it couldn't be further from the truth. These people are very politically motivated right now. What they did during the Obama administration didn't scare them off from doing it even more and more. And for them, Trump was a legitimate target because they're ideologically motivated. Right. They're not motivated by the law.
No.
And this is what's really terrifying. So it was a bad day for law and order, and it's only getting worse. And I think, unfortunately, it's going to be a permanent thumbs down for a long time. Okay. We still have the January 6 trials coming up. Right. Okay. That was my number 1 too, but you put some bones on those flesh here. I have a thumbs up. Tim Scott, the junior senator from South Carolina. Now, Tim Scott is kind of a boilerplate Republican, so I'm not particularly attracted to him for his politics. I mean, he's kind of this, mishmash or fusion, as they call it, of conservative and libertarian ideas. But I thought his reaction to Biden's speech was really quite amazing and quite touching, okay? And it was one of those really kind of rare moments where I felt like a politician was speaking to me, okay? Really, I mean, it was very personal. It was very, very well delivered. I think it was passionate, juxtaposition to Joe, which is kind of still get off the grass type thing. He's always that way. Right. And to call him an Uncle Tom, really, I found that really offensive. I found it really, really offensive. I did a crosstalk on it yesterday, and I asked my guests, I said, I thought we had retired that term, okay? Because, if there was a white Republican politician delivering, and say, it's just white supremacists in the Republican Party. And then, you have the only black senator, and he delivers it, and he's an Uncle Tom. And so, I mean, and that's that's racism because he's going along with it all. I mean, can you get your stories straight? Can you get your scripts straight? Why don't you judge him and what he had to say, which was quite good. And one of my guests on Cross said, and it wasn't Trumpian, and I said that was good. Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
No, I agree with you. I have to say, I haven't really thought that highly of him up until then.
Mediocre.
Yeah, he always seemed mediocre, but I was surprised. I mean, it was quite an effective speech. He, as you say, he spoke from the heart, and then that whole, Twitter trending Uncle Tim. It was just so shocking. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, that phrase, Uncle Tom. I mean, that's just about the worst thing. Next to the N word, that is the worst thing you can say. It is shocking that people think that this is acceptable to use this kind of language. But apparently, because it's a Republican, then it's okay to engage in these racist tropes. Remember when that woman. The one who was at MSNBC, the black woman who does that.
Joy Reid.
Exactly, Joy Reid referred to Clarence Thomas as Uncle Clarence, as if isn't that funny? Anyone picking up would pick up exactly. Why do you refer to him as Uncle Clarence? You don't refer to Sam Alito as Uncle Sam, because you refer to him as Uncle Clarence. So it's a very interesting how these, liberals are quite happy to trade in these racist and homophobic tropes. I mean, the attacks that have been made against Glenn Greenwald. I mean, everybody's quite happy to suggest that he's motivated, that it's on account of his sexual preference, that he hates all these young women. Complete, and apparently that's fine. That's okay. He has the wrong political views, so you can trade in these homophobic nonsense.
I went to high school, university, and grad school in California, where gay people, men and women, were around me all of the time, and never once did I see a gay man prejudiced towards women. They just don't care. Okay, I mean, it doesn't. It's something that is not even meaningful. They're just another person. Okay, that's it. I mean, when I think of Glenn Greenwald, and you and I talk about him quite a bit, do you ever think about his sexual orientation? No, I never do. No. Even when he mentions his husband and his dogs, it's just like, okay, that's his arrangement. Good for him. Right. Because what's most important to me is that he has an absolutely brilliant mind and he's a great writer. And I appreciate that. Okay. The fact that he's gay is immaterial. Right. And so going after him on that. See, I mean, the thing is that, this whole identity project, okay, everyone can have their identity, but then they turn around and say, but you're using your identity in the wrong way.
Right.
Like, who are you to say these things?
That's exactly right, and it is just a disgrace that Twitter trending Uncle Tim was allowed to stay on for, I think people say 12 hours, before they thought it appropriate to take it down. It's really shocking, but apparently as long as you're on the right, have the right political views, and the other person doesn't, then it's free for all. Use the worst racist terms, use the worst sexist terms, they're fine, that's nothing wrong. And incidentally, when we talk about sexism, people use that against Republican women, who are also very unfashionable, whether it's Sarah Palin or, Marjorie Taylor Greene, boom, again. Open season, bring out whatever, nasty, sexist tropes you've got in your cupboard. Bring it all out. No one's going to reprimand you.
But if a member of the GOP ever says anything remotely like that, you're disappeared.
Right. Okay, that's my turn. Okay. Next, thumbs down is Russia. They retaliated yesterday against the European Union by declaring 8 European EU officials. Some of the EU officials, some of them were just simply, people who the Russians were not very happy about, like the prosecutor chief in Berlin, persona non grata. in Russia. This was in retaliation to the EU having banned 6 Russian officials from the EU in March related to Navalny. So the EU, so the Russians retaliated asymmetrically. It was 8 to them. Some of the people involved was the president of the European Parliament. Then there was that woman, I think Vera Yukova, who's beat his values. Yeah, she's very into values. And as I say, the chief prosecutor in Berlin. Anyway, 8. And the EU officialdom is up in arms, indignant. How dare the Russians do this? What, I mean, this is, obviously Russia has no interest in improving relations with the EU. Completely warrantless, no basis for this whatsoever.
Came out of nowhere.
Yeah, came out of nowhere. It's just amazing. I mean, how people just live in their own world. Russia said, we will retaliate. And when the retaliation comes, I've never been so insulted in all my life. So this was a joint statement by Ursula von der Leyen, and then the other bigwigs, the head of the president of the European Council and the president of the European Parliament, the one who's just been banned from Russia. So I think that's a thumbs down for the EU, who really are amazingly unaware of themselves.
And we're going to talk about this on Crosstalk tomorrow to some extent, and which will be aired on Monday. Kind of a thumbs down for Biden's address. I don't want to go through it in detail, but the reason why I put it on my list is because it is in juxtaposition to Tim Scott. If you listen to Biden, America's on suicide watch, okay? I mean, crisis, 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 and only he can save the country, and the party can save the country. The problem with all of this here is Joe and Democrats, if there's so many crises, don't you think bipartisanship, just a tad bit might be in order right now? I mean, these people just are living in the clouds, okay? If FDR came to power during an amazingly turbulent moment in American history, but at least he had a 200-seat majority, okay? Okay, and he basically said, I got a majority here. I mean, unprecedented a majority, and we're going to move fast, okay? But see, Joe, first of all, we had no idea what he was going to do because nobody talked about it during the campaign, and court packing, adding states, and all that. We had no idea. Well, apparently he has some ideas here, and he's just unilaterally throwing it down everyone's throat. Which even Democrats, there are Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate don't want to go down his path. And I was asked in my Crosstalk program, someone said that Joe Biden is a transformative president, which was kind of made me chuckle. And I said, yeah, he's transformative. He used to be a segregationist, essentially. And now what is he talking about? That's a transformation, and an amazing one at that. So, this talk of bipartisanship, which is absolutely necessary, but there's no indication they're interested in it whatsoever. So that made his speech to the joint session of Congress just a complete sham.
No, I think so. Yeah, and it's very good points. I mean, huge majority for FDR and the Democrats in the 1932 election, and America was in the worst crisis ever in its history. I mean, that was a real economic crisis, so you really did need to undertake drastic measures. How to justify it like this? I mean, the economy is recovering pretty smoothly. There isn't such the crisis. The crisis isn't there. So, therefore, Biden is coming on with these vast programs. And what's the justification for it? I mean, LBJ, who also had a huge majority in the 64 election, though that was a bit of a fluke because that was kind of about the assassination. It was a kind of, America was expiating its guilt.
And it was Barry Goldwater.
Exactly, Barry Goldwater, but it was sort of an expiation of guilt over the death of, the young, charismatic JFK. So they gave him this huge sympathy vote. And LBJ, I think, misinterpreted that as a mandate for drastic social change, and he paid a heavy political price for that. I think Biden's kind of doing the same. There really isn't a mandate for vast government programs. I mean, he's kind of invented this that somehow, people really want all of this.
There was no book. There was no blue wave in November.
Exactly.
I mean, minus the White House,
Right.
you know, the Republicans did very well. And the Republicans, including Trump, screwed up Georgia in the worst possible way. I mean, that was an unforgivable loss. Okay. That was really unforgivable. Okay. And they put up, the two Republicans are running were just two airheads. I mean, just awful candidates. Okay.
Right. I think McConnell wanted to lose that so that he could blame Trump for that. I think that was the Republican plan. I think Karl Rove, who ran both of those campaigns, I think he wanted to use Georgia to discredit Trump. It was an absolutely,
What was he making? $20,000 a day, you know, for that fiasco?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but that leads to my thumbs down about Biden's address, because it's like he's on the one hand he's saying that, oh, we want all these great programs, and at the same time he's kind of declaring war on half the country. I mean, when he says, well, we've got all these terrorist threats, ISIS, Al Qaeda, Iran, or whatever, and then he says, but the most serious threat of all comes from white supremacists, you're basically then declaring these people are worse than ISIS and Al Qaeda. You're declaring war against your country while you're unleashing all these government programs. And then you say, well, we need to come together. Well, which is it? I mean, you don't declare war against half the country and then start talking about coming together. And then not to mention.
So you're going to give money to the parents who have children who happen to be white supremacists? You're going to cut them checks, Joe? You're going to give money to white supremacists? Come on, wake up. This is stupid.
It really is. It really is. And then he kept repeating that phrase about, oh, we got to get rid of the systemic racism. And again, what the hell is it? Who practices systemic racism? The federal government? Well, that if it is, that's a major law. I mean, it's already supposed to have ended it 1964. That's 56 years ago. So if it's practicing it, well, you've been in the federal government since 1972. What have you done about it?
How many major cities are run by Democrats and run by politicians who are Black? A lot.
Right.
Look at police forces. How many minority police forces are in these big cities? Quite a few.
Right.
So, I mean, are they partaking in this?
Right.
Are they willingly partaking in a systemic racist system? Really?
Right.
What's her name? Lighthead, Lightfoot, Light Air? What's her name in Chicago?
Lighthead. Sounds about right.
I mean, is she part of this systemic racism too?
That's it. That's exactly it. Again, no one ever asked that question by saying, oh, we've got the systemic racism. Well, almost all of the major police chiefs in all the major metropolises in the United States is Black. Most of the mayors in the cities are Black or liberals, like the mayor of Minneapolis. I mean, so who is it? Who are these people who are practicing?
If the military,
is it Yale? Is it the banks? I mean, what institution? Just name names. What institutions are practicing systemic racism? Don't instead of just condemning the country for systemic racism, who is it who's doing this?
And there's what we hear there are domestic terrorists and white racist supremacists in the military, but it's run by an African American.
Right.
Okay, I mean. And by the way, George, Barack Obama was elected twice.
I know.
White people had to vote for him.
Yeah, exactly.
Alrighty, my thumbs up. Again, I don't want to put too much time on it because we did a complete video on it, which our viewers really, really liked. The French generals and retired and I don't know, after they printed it, I don't know if they're still presently serving, but it was a very interesting wake-up call how neoliberalism is putting the state in an existential position. And I think it was very, very interesting. I think it's a sign of our times. And I think that it was prescient in many ways, because this ideology is threatening the nation state and sovereignty, okay? And it's very, very serious stuff. And this letter tells us is that there's not a lot of time, okay? We can't continue down this path. So I don't want to waste time on it. Go back when you're on our homepage. I think it's back 2 or 3 videos. We go at right length on it.
Right. No,
that was a thumbs up, by the way.
It's a thumbs up. No, I think it's very good. My next thumbs down is, again, goes back to the federal government. and Derek Chauvin. Now, Derek Chauvin is to say the least, no hero. He clearly, whatever happened on that day with George Floyd, Chauvin certainly did not behave well, and did not conduct himself in a proper professional manner. But I'll leave that aside. What we found out is that the federal government, the DOJ, already had a plan in the works for what would happen if he were acquitted. So if the jury were to come back with an acquittal, there and then the DOJ would storm in and arrest Chauvin on civil rights violations charges immediately. I mean, as soon as the jury came in with a not guilty verdict, they would arrest him on the spot in the courtroom. And now then you say, okay, great. Well, they're not going to do it now. They said, but that's now they've decided, yeah, but we're going to bring these federal civil rights charges against him anyway. We're going to bring that against him anyway, and we're going to bring them against those others, the four, either 3 or 4 police officers who were his accomplices. So they're facing state charges, and now they're also going to be facing federal charges arising out of the same crime. So not only is this clearly double jeopardy.
Double jeopardy, yeah.
It's clearly double jeopardy. But at the same time, it is the point of insanity. I mean, punishment should always be appropriate to the crime. I mean, that's the whole point. Punishment should be appropriate. I mean, there's a reason why we don't chop people's hands off for stealing, because it's disproportionate punishment. There's something in the Constitution, in the 8th Amendment, about cruel and unusual punishment. So, we know what happened with Chauvin and Floyd. To start thinking in terms of, we're just going to send this person away for prison for 100 years, it's clearly disproportionate. And yet the government is just coming after him, out of vindictiveness and essentially, in a way that violates, a constitutional and humane norms.
Yeah, but they're not doing this to punish him. He's already been punished. His life is over. He will die in prison, okay, most likely. No, this is to make people feel good about themselves. Right. This is the cruelty of it all. I mean, this is a good story. Okay, I mean, they're not going to let this one go. They're going to squeeze this one for everything it's got. Okay, but it's not to punishment. It's virtue signaling. Okay, I mean, the DOJ has to show itself to be virtuous. Okay, I don't care if it's virtuous. I want them to follow the law. Okay, and they are the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Right. They collect facts. Right. They don't draw determinations. Other people do that. That's why when Jim Comey determined the fate of Hillary Clinton, I remember watching it live and I said, well, he has no power to do that. What is he doing?
That has to be one of the most bizarre conferences ever, where the chief of the FBI determines whether will you be able to press criminal charges against Hillary Clinton. I mean, it was just insane. I mean, what the hell is a police chief doing determining whether you can press criminal charges or not? I mean, it's insane.
Yeah, that was the Attorney General, certainly AWOL. Okay, let's see. Well, as usual, a thumbs down. I'm really, for the liberal legacy media, I'm really sick and tired of the sycophantic coverage of Joe Biden. I mean, there's no substance to it whatsoever. I mean, I looked at some of the coverage of his speech. I mean, there's no substance. It was like his voice was reassuring. I don't care about his voice. I don't really care much about his delivery either. It was what he had to say. That's why I usually read these things. I don't watch them, okay? Because I can read it much faster than Joe can say it, okay? And
apropos of reading it, I mean, it is quite extraordinary that the White House publishes these transcripts and it leaves in place all his stammering, mispronunciation, misuse of words. It's all there. They don't clean it up and sort of put it into a smooth text. So anyone looking at it says this guy is just simply inappropriate. Now maybe that's going to be used against him. Maybe
Well,
people people close to Harris are responsible for putting the transcript out. But it is just amazing that every single verbal faux pas that he commits is there still on the text.
or you can flip it on the other side. And this is something I've been thinking about as well. I mean, one of the things it's really, what makes Joe Biden interesting is the fact that he's not interesting. And this could be a strategy, I think. No, look, half the country loved to hate Hillary Clinton. Half the country loved to hate Donald Trump, okay? And so, and then Bill Clinton to some extent too. I mean, George W. Bush, he left with a huge cloud over him. But with Joe, and this is one of the things that GOP have such a problem with, is they really have a hard time getting people to hate him, okay? Because he's not hateable all that much. He's kind of irrelevant, but to hate him, well, no, I mean, this could be part of an act, because if you look at, if you watch the speech and then read the speech, you get have a very different conclusion, because this is a White House and the Democratic Party in a hurry, in a big time hurry, and they want to spend as much as they possibly can before the purse strings disappear. Right. But the delivery of it is this kind of stammering old man that doesn't threaten anyone. I mean, he doesn't. Okay, he has a panic attack losing his mask.
Right.
I mean, and this could be a very interesting ploy here.
I agree. I mean, that is a very interesting question, that whether he's this whole thing is an act. I mean, you remember, we have boxers. You always used to do this thing of, I'm about to go. I'm weak on my knees, inviting the foolish challenger to go in for the kill, and then of course, he gets the counter punch and the hook, and that's it. It's over. So he may well be playing that, what in boxing is called playing possum. That's a possibility.
Or they're just taking advantage of it, okay? I mean, at the very least, they certainly are taking advantage of it, because the optics are there, and plus they have the media playing along with it, and say, he's embracing America, and he's creating a new tempo, and America's back, and what did he actually say? Okay, I don't care what you people think about it, okay? I don't care.
No, I think it's a good point. I mean, he is, but he's seen by others as innocuous. I don't see him that way. I mean, I think that's the problem. That to me, it's hard. Leave aside his policies, but it's hard for me to get past a serial plagiarist. I mean, this is a guy, who had to drop out of a race. Admittedly, it was 30 years ago. Nonetheless, his plagiarism was quite appalling. I mean, this is you're a professional politician. You've been around for a long time. You've been presumably delivering speeches for many years, and you go and steal the speech of Neil Kinnock.
Well, I mean, if you look at his address on Buy America, I mean, that you could have taken that from a Trump speech.
Right. No, I think that's it. And I think that's what he is. I mean, I do think that he's kind of a slug. I mean, I just think he has a low moral. I mean, the fact that his family is basically a kind of an organized money-making kind of machine. I mean, they've all been living off him, living off the access that he has. I mean, all of them, not just his son, but all his brothers and sisters, they all just raking in dough. Because of him, because of he knows important people, and people want to keep the Bidens happy. I mean, that is trading influence.
He's a mediocre politician. He always has been, okay? And he was coronated. Obama made a few calls. The Obama people wanted Harris. They're going to get Joe across the line. Kamala will be vice president. Maybe she will fill in his shoes during his term, but there's no second term for him. And Kamala is the prize. I mean, and what they want to do is as you pointed out, at least through macro numbers, the economy is roaring back. I mean, they want to take advantage of all of these things. They're thinking, see, unlike the GOP that very rarely thinks, okay, they react. They don't think, they react. The Democrats, they're thinking big and they're thinking way out there, okay? They're thinking about, you know, Kamala's thinking about the drapes in the White House already.
That's it. No, but you're right, because if inflation does come, somebody else is going to have to pick up the pieces, and then somebody else will then have to do the unpopular things to squeeze the inflation out of the economy. And boy, do you pay the political price when you do that. I mean, it's what Jimmy Carter did, because the anti-inflation policies started under Jimmy Carter with skyrocketing interest rates, and Jimmy Carter was defeated.
Remember a whip inflation now, Jerry Ford.
Yeah. But you know, Carter was the one who paid the price, you know.
Yeah, he was left holding the bag.
Exactly. So that as long as it's not me, I retire as the popular avuncular figure. So yeah, you're right there.
Right, you're right.
So well, another thumbs down is again, and it goes back to the Giuliani thing, is again the media coverage of it. Now, you would have thought any journalist would think, now let's see, Giuliani represented Trump during Russiagate. He represented Trump during the first impeachment that involved Ukraine. Giuliani was investigating the Bidens in Ukraine about their involvement in Burisma, and also the issue of Biden, essentially blackmailing Poroshenko to fire the prosecutor who was investigating his son. Giuliani was doing all this, and lo and behold, Biden comes to power, and within a few months, his DOJ goes after Giuliani. You think, I wonder if there's a causal relationship here. Could Biden be unleashing the DOJ against his nemesis? No. The media just reports, well, it looks like Giuliani's in a bit of trouble. He's in a real pickle now. Maybe the DOJ has him dead to rights.
Yeah, but the interesting thing, remember, Giuliani's name was mentioned during the debates.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? So, I mean, is that something, like if I make it across the finish line, I have my first to-do list. Okay.
That's it. And that's it. And you would have thought, now, again, if this were the Trump DOJ and he was going after somebody who was his nemesis, I mean, the media would be all over it. Well, of course, the DOJ has become very politicized under Trump. He obviously has appointed all his political hatchet men in the DOJ, and they're going after Trump's political enemies. But here, no. Well, the DOJ is just conducting a very fair-minded, balanced investigation.
We've already mentioned, I think it was either on election night, November 2016, or it was the next day. And, Trump said, well, Hillary, she's got her own problems,
She's suffered enough.
I'm paraphrasing letter B.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. Okay. It's kind of a hobby horse of mine, thumbs down. I'm sick and tired of Fox News giving Pompeo a platform. It just really irks me to the nth degree, which gives me reason to believe that they're propping him for 2024. Okay, because when you look at Hannity and you look at Laura, they just give him a tongue bath every time he's on.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. I think they are doing that with Pompeo. I think they see him as a kind of mini-me to Trump. Because he would carry on, his foreign policy, and unlike almost everybody else who served Trump, Pompeo was loyal. He remained loyal to the end, and so you don't have the sort of the baggage that the others who basically as soon as they had the opportunity, they stabbed Trump in the back. But Pompeo never did that, and I think that's probably they're thinking in terms of let's have Pompeo.
And he came up with the Tea Party. Okay, so
right.
That's something they like as well. But I think that if they delve deep into what the Tea Party movement was about, Fox fundamentally misunderstands what it was about. Okay, because they love what's his name, former Newt Gingrich. Okay, so I mean, you know, it's a real mishmash over there, and there's no consistency.
Well, I think it's a mishmash, but the problem is that there isn't really any figure that one can call a Trumpian, the Trump's heir apparent. I mean,
there isn't one, and there never will be one.
That's it. So you've got people like, you know, Josh Hawley, but Hall is just so uncharismatic. I mean, it's just, you know, you look at him and you say, this guy just doesn't have any popular appeal. He never will have any popular appeal. And then others like Ted Cruz, you know, they have their own agenda. You know, he just went along with Trump for the ride. I mean, you know, he's not really a Trumpian.
Well, it reminds me.
Who is the heir apparent?
It reminds me when Ted Kennedy tried to primary Carter, remember? And I remember a good friend of mine, a Politico, he said, I said, you know, another Kennedy's in the race. And he said, he's a very good senator. He should stay there. Okay. And Ted Cruz, you're a good senator. That's where you should stay. This is really wide open right now, but the GOP is making a fundamental mistake. Fox News and conservative media is making a fundamental mistake, trying to find another Trump. There will never be another one. Deal with it, okay? Start thinking ahead for a change instead of reacting. And I caution conservatives, real conservatives, don't let Trump determine the narrative all of the time, because there's a lot of other ideas out there. Trump was successful in some areas and he was dreadful in others. Okay, so there's no such thing as Trumpism, guys.
No, I think there isn't. No, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind that the Republican Party is now divided between this a populist wing and this corporatist wing. Clearly, the populist wing was the wing that responded most strongly to Trump. They're the people, you know, that was Trump's base. Then the question is this: if Republicans then go back to, you know, catering to their corporate masters, then they're done. They have no hope of winning. There's no way, all of those George W. Bush, Chris Christie, that whole gang that ran in 2016, then none of them is ever going to win an election. So the question is, how do you mobilize that populist base? Now, someone like Josh Hawley, he's got good ideas, when he goes after big tech, going after the corporations, that mobilizes the base. But like I said, some of the bad ideas, his Trump's foreign policy was a fiasco in many ways. So you have to think about those things. But I don't think there's any future for anyone who doesn't try to understand and try to lead the populist base. Not just say, oh yeah, we're the populist party. We're the party of the working class. We're the middle class. Don't just keep saying it. Show us. Anyone can say anything. Just show us that you really are, tapping into this populist wing.
Isn't it interesting? Is that when we had under Trump and others starting to talk about the working class people, and it was always a blip. Oh yeah, good, but you can't keep doing it without doing something about it. Right. And this is what they're coming across. You can't just keep saying it. It's a matter of, if you keep saying it without doing something, you're going to look like a fraud, okay? And unbelievable. And you know what? A lot of people might be surprised by this, but when I'm really sick and tired of them saying, this is socialism, this is socialism. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of millennials that want to have this kind of thing. I mean, you're so out of touch with the rhetoric. Okay, I saw this interesting report how people even some Democrats are turned off by this woke lexicon, okay, because I don't understand it. Right. But the same thing is happening with the GOP. I mean, if you have to talk to people where they are, okay? And this is a big barrier for them. I find it hysterical watching all these Republican figures say, the party's united, we're united again. No, you're not. You're at each other's throats within the party. Right. And I see no way forward at this point in time with the set of characters out there.
And I think it's a very good point that that word socialist does not raise red flags, because basically, you have, people are not afraid of that word. It doesn't mean anything. They don't see it as I mean, back in the 80s, you remember there was the word liberal, and it seemed to work for the Republicans, that Lee Atwater in 1988.
A real hack.
It was quite effective. He said Michael Dukakis is a card-carrying liberal. He's a liberal. Now, I think liberal did have a negative, and it maybe still has a kind of a negative connotation. People didn't really like liberal. Socialism doesn't have that. People think, okay, socialism is pretty decent, sharing the goods in society, something for the person who doesn't normally get anything. So you keep saying, he's a socialist, he's a communist.
Doesn't work.
It just falls on deaf.
Okay, maybe, and there's some interesting data about it. Yes, it does work in pockets, like in some districts in Florida, because they're primarily of Cuban descent. Okay, and they're making a reference to Castro's Cuba. But on a nationwide level, it doesn't work. Okay, as a matter of fact, you have a lot of young people whose prospects are pretty sparse. So yeah, that might be the solution to some of these problems here. So they really need to get off that. I cringe every time I hear it. And on top of it, everyone, I lived in socialist countries, communist countries.
Well, that's another thing. That's an important issue, is that you're talking about a younger generation. You're talking about most voters, many younger voters, they're already born either when the Cold War was already over, or it was already coming to an end. You had that kind of benign Gorbachev Gorbachev came to power in 1985. That's already 36 years ago. So to have, living memory, you're in your 40s, or you're in your 50s, if you have any recollection of the Soviet Union. And when you bring up Mao, people have no idea who Mao is. The Khmer Rouge. Talk like this is certainly so idiotic.
It is idiotic, and they're only speaking to themselves. And conservative media, you're not making any inroads at all. At the very best, you're getting confirmation from the people that want to listen to you anyway, but it's not furthering the conversation. Right. And I think they do it at their peril. Okay, I personally, people might be surprised. I think instead of this passion, this mantra to credential yourself and bankrupt yourself before you're 22 years old. Okay, I mean, free 2-year community college and bare bones. I mean, computer science, engineering, mathematics, that kind of stuff. I'm for it. I have no problem with it.
That makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think it's my turn.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm going to end on a thumbs up, and that was yesterday's Tucker Carlson show, in which the longest section of it was about Frank Luntz, GOP pollster of many years.
On Tucker, yeah, right.
Yeah, on Tucker Carlson, yeah. GOP pollster of many years standing. And this was he did a real number on Luntz. And they showed him he's an absolute fraud. He's a flack for the corporations. His methodology is absurd. He basically picks a random group of people, puts them in a room together, and that is a focus group. And in this focus group, anyone can get a focus group to say anything. You just select the people who are going to be in the focus group, and they're going to say whatever Frank Luntz or whoever wants them to say. And that's what Luntz does. That's, he makes a lot of money for corporations. I mean, all his clients, and Tucker listed his clients, including Google. Now, what was so particularly pernicious about Luntz is that the GOP puts its faith in Luntz. He's still there. He's the person they listen to. This Republican powwow recently. They had Luntz there, speaking to them, and he tells them what these corporate masters want him to say, which is, well, voters really, really want cheap labor coming into the United States. They really, really want to be humane. They want an amnesty. They want to path to citizenship. That's what voters, and the Republicans sit there listening as if he knows something about voters. He doesn't know anything about voters. He just rakes a lot of money in from the corporations. And you would have thought that the GOP by now would know the corporations are not their friends. I mean, they saw what they did when they just made some mild changes to voting procedures. The corporations came down on them with savagery. And we know about what's happened on social media and everything else. So for them to go on listening to a flack for the corporations just shows how clueless the Republicans really are. But I think anyone who didn't see Tucker's show yesterday should look it up on YouTube, because it was a devastating indictment of Frank Luntz.
I can't. There was one hedge fund guy that he did the same thing to about a year ago.
Yeah, I remember.
Remember that? Yeah. But what Tucker did, that was something I've never seen him do to a public figure. The hedge fund guy, I didn't even know his name. Okay, but Frank Luntz has been around a lot. Everyone type in PBS Frank Luntz. There's a very, very long interview with him. It's one of these frontline things that they splice up and make a documentary, but then PBS will put the entire interviews of all of them. It's he's a weird guy. Okay, he ended up crying during the interview. That was kind of weird too. He's of Hungarian descent. Okay, that's where the name comes from. But I mean, he's an opportunist, is what he is, more than anything else. He's if he's a conservative, he's very much in the vein of a McCain. Conservative, okay, right. Because that's where a lot of people ended up picking up on his name, because that's when Trump said, I don't like losers, I don't like people that lose, and Luntz, the guru of pollsters, said, I thought he was done, he was finished. Okay, remember that, So yeah, I mean, I know how focus groups work, because I worked at a consumer goods company, and I've seen how they're made. I'm not particularly impressed with his results. So the fact that I think that Tucker, he did it because he was just angry that here's a guy that is basically a front person for big corporations, and now he's down at Mar-a-Lago telling everyone how to run the party. I think you should be very, very worried about that. And that goes back to what our messaging issue, okay, that we've talked about today, is that the messaging is going to be off here. And of course, I mean, if you think corporations are your friends, I mean, then you need to get out of politics, okay? Go into house painting, okay, or something like that, okay? And gardening.
That just goes back to the point we were talking about, that your GOP keeps saying, oh yeah, we're the party of the working class, we're the party of the middle class, and then you go back and you go and listen to Luntz. Well, of course, Luntz is going to tell you all of these things. These are the things that you've got to do, and Trump must stop tweeting. That's because the voters really, really are upset about Trump tweeting. Which nobody other than those who hate Trump tweet. I mean, the people who support Trump couldn't care less that he tweets.
I can't even imagine the number of people that were gainfully employed because they were reacting to Donald Trump's tweets. Exactly. Their whole existence revolved around reacting to his tweets. Okay. Right. All righty. My last thumbs down. Shouldn't surprise anyone. Washington Post isn't doing fact checking anymore. Okay. No, with the advent of the Biden administration, there's no reason to fact check this president whatsoever. I mean, this tells you everything we need to know, is that the Bezoses of the world, they're going to cover, I mean, and the spectrum is so huge of the media that is protecting this administration, and some of their really crazy ideas. I mean, the fact that, Joe is basically, he was deeply involved during the time when desegregating the country, and he was a conservative force within the Democratic Party. And now he's at the forefront, the face mask of this wokeist agenda is very, very terrifying. We need more discussion now than ever before. And the Washington Post is saying, we don't need any.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And so, there was this cavalcade of the fact checkers throughout the media, like, oh, Trump told 1,375 lies in the last 24 hours. And then of course, when you looked at it, what they call lies, or just simply you don't agree with him. I mean, they don't even know what a lie is.
It's just hyperbole. I mean, exactly. 99% of it it's the biggest, the best, it's the big league.
Right. Yes, but often, these are matters of interpretation. I mean, it's, you can say somebody's a bad guy, you can say somebody's a good guy. It's not a lie. I mean, these are just, these are opinions. People don't, really need to find out what a lie means. A lie means that you know something to be true and you say the opposite. That's what a lie is. Just if you're wrong about something, then you're wrong about it. That doesn't mean
No, for these people, a lie is something they disagree with.
Right, exactly. You don't like it, with Trump's cases, they just didn't like him. They didn't like his views. They didn't like what he said. So they called it a lie. But now, as you say, with Biden, they've dropped all of that. And I think it's clearly an indication of how they're going to cover the Biden administration and how they intend to cover the elections, because there's going to be the midterms coming up, and they're going to go into overdrive against the opposition to Biden. Obviously, chiefly Trump. I think they're going to ignore Trump. I think they're just going to, they say
exactly. Yeah. But they have a surrogate. They have a surrogate. January 6th. That's their surrogate.
That's it.
They're going to push this thing out a few months, and then it will last a few months, and they'll be talking about it for months after that, and it will bleed right into the midterms. Mark, you heard it here first.
I think so. And that's why you're getting these stories like, well, Trump is in serious legal trouble. Trump's legal problems are growing.
Hunting.
Trump's legal jeopardy is quite dire. It's the walls are closing in. Remember how many times we had that story throughout the Trump years? The walls are closing in. So they're going to run with that, but they won't actually cover any of his speeches or in his campaigns. I mean, they're just determined to ignore all of that.
Yes, it will be. They will make him the most popular figure in the Republican Party of half the country. They will completely ignore him. That's what they're going to do.
Yeah, right. No, that's exactly. I mean, that's why America comes more and more to resemble those dictatorships that America is always condemning, where the opposition gets no airtime. It's like, they got no airtime. Yeah, that's kind of the way it's going to be in America. The opposition gets no airtime.
Well, it's just like we said in yesterday's video. Regime change has come home to roost.
Absolutely. All right. Well, those were the thumbs ups and thumbs downs for the week. So some people are cowering and some people are breathing a sigh of relief. Well, we'll be back again to do the same.
Stay on your toes. We'll be back next week.
We'll be back next week. All right. We are now on Rumble. Look us up on Rumble. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.